Hello, my name's Craig Sedgwick, and this is my vlog 1 for skills versus capacity in the weight room. So before we start, let's try and classify the best we can capacity and skill. So there's often a great deal of crossover regarding capacity and skill, but generally speaking, a skill is the athlete's ability to control movement efficiently, and a capacity is the ability of the body to be able to fulfill a movement task. The first athlete we will look at demonstrates capacity issues during the back squat. If we look at the athlete's setup position, this is not ideal as her right hand is too far out on the bar. As she initiates the descent phase, there is an obvious S-shaped sway. This sway moves from left to right, resulting in the right side taking a majority of the weight. At the bottom of the squat there is a pelvic sway to the right side, and then during the ascent phase, the athlete pushes more through the right side than the left to produce the force. On the lateral views, I'm relating back to the technical model. She initiates the movement with her hips, however there is a forward lean and the bar is moving anteriorly. There is a loss of hip flexion and knee flexion, however there appears to be adequate dorsiflexion as the knees are over the toes. The thighs are not parallel with the floor. One notable point is that the left knee hyperextends and terminal stance. The athlete does not achieve full extension at the hip. Her overhead squat demonstrates good shoulder and spinal mobility, however there is still an excessive forward lean. She is able to get good depth with an assisted squat. However, even with assistance there is still a sway to the right side. The athlete demonstrates internal rotation restrictions at the hip and tight hip flexors. There is also a capacity issue at the knees. The athlete has excessive external rotation in the posterior lateral corner of the knee and hyperextension at the knee on the left side. She has adequate dorsiflexion at the ankles. A derivative exercise to help with the sway to the right hand side could be a wide stance squat. This will allow the hips to externally rotate and allow a deeper position. Other exercises that should be performed would be a squat with a TheraBand around the knee to give encouragement for the knee to be controlled into hyperextension. She would also be required to do some mobility work on the left and right hips. So to summarise the findings of this capacity related issue during the back squat, this athlete has restrictions in hip rotation. These mobility restrictions have resulted in compensatory movements during the back squat. Also added to these compensatory movements is the lack of the ability to control the knee due to the loss of passive restraints at the knee. The athlete is required to work much harder to control stability around that knee, so weight shifts to the right hand side. Athlete 2 has a skill issue during the back squatting exercise. When relating back to the technical model, the setup position is all wrong, as the bar is too high on the trapezius, the bar is uneven, the right foot is pointing out too much, and the feet should be slightly wider. During the descent phase, there is excessive pronation at the right foot, and there is also valgus at the right and left knee. During the ascent, the bar is more uneven. On the side view, the left foot is further forward than the right. During the descent phase, the bar moves anteriorly and is rotated. At the bottom of the squat, there is a loss of dorsiflexion, a loss of hip and knee flexion, and the hips are not parallel to the floor. At the very bottom position, there is an excessive loss of lumbar control. Hip range of movement is normal, however, ankle dorsiflexion is reduced. To look at the ankle as a capacity issue, a squat with plates under the ankle was performed. This improved the efficiency of the squat. However, there was still uncontrolled, uncoordinated and excessive forward lean during the movement. Next, we look at some global movement patterns. The athlete was unable to perform the Superman activity without losing balance and control of the lumbar spine. A bodyweight squat using a dowel repeatedly showed the same movement patterning. During a single knee dip activity, there was excessive internal rotation of the hip and valgus at the knee, plus overpronation at the ankle. The inline lunge activity was uncoordinated, and he was unable to maintain his knee over his toe. I would also try a less loaded squats with a band around his knees. This will facilitate a little bit of proprioceptive feedback to stop him internally rotating on the ascent and descent phase of the squat. To add to this, with him having the deficiency in ankle dorsiflexion, some of these exercises could be performed with plates under his ankles to help him achieve the movement skill. Summary of findings for athlete 2. The athlete does have a capacity issue at the ankle with reduced dorsiflexion. However, this is a skill problem. Movement-based tasks such as bodyweight squat, lunging, single knee dip, coordinated Superman and hopping demonstrate a global lack of movement skill. There are balance and coordination issues with the movements that do not seem to relate to his capacity. This is the reason why this is a skill issue and not a capacity issue. During the bent over rowing task, the athlete is seen to have a forward sway, and he has excessive neck extension. From the side view, there is a kyphotic posture in the thoracic spine. The bar travels in an appropriate direction. However, the athlete could be slightly more bent over during the row. During the mid to late pull phase, the athlete uses a head forward and chest down movement to create a bit of momentum to finish the task off. Also, as the bar reaches the end of its pull, there is excessive loss of lumbar spine control. When the athlete performs a bent over row in an unloaded task, there is still the same movement pattern of loss of lumbar spine control. There is good active range of movement at the shoulder. However, as the shoulder eccentrically lowers, there is an obvious bilateral scapular inferior tilt. During an overhead bar press exercise, the mobilizer muscles take over and perform the task very well. During isolated spinal movements, flexion at the lumbar spine is accompanied by excessive thoracic kyphosis. As the lumbar spine extends, there is an excessive amount of lumbar extension. The player is unable to dissociate movement from his hip and his lumbar spine. As can be seen on hip flexion exercise, there is a loss of lumbar control. This demonstrates poor motor control of the psoas. There is a loss of rotatory stability during the long arm plank position exercise. During a hip hinge exercise using a kettlebell, it is clear to see there is loss of control of the lumbar spine. Again, he cannot dissociate movement between his lumbar spine and his hips. Corrective exercises for this case should focus on low load, high repetition training to enhance movement skill. We need to focus on the skill element of the exercise and corrective control. We would need to repeat the exercise but maintaining control of the lumbar spine. I have placed a band in front of his face to prevent him from forward leaning during the bent over rowing task. Summary of findings for Athlete 3, capacity versus skill. As mentioned at the start, there is a crossover between capacity and skill. There is some capacity issues here with the thoracic spine mobility. However, I believe the main issue with not being able to complete the bent over rowing task is more of a skill task issue, not a capacity issue. This is because he's unable to maintain his lumbar spine control during the bent over row during both loaded and unloaded tasks. During the bent over rowing task, athlete 4 has got quite a wide grip on the bar, and it's clear to see that both his shoulders are in an abducted position. During the pull, it's clear to see that the athlete pulls the bar by using an extension and abduction pattern at the shoulders. At the end of the pull, it is clear to see that the left elbow is slightly higher than the right. The left elbow is further away from the torso than the right, and there is an increased angle at the shoulder joint into abduction on the left. The side view reveals a very straight back, however he is not bent over very far. During the pull phase from the side view, it's clear to see that the arms are abducting rather than extending, and the left arm is not extended as far as the right. There is no loss of lumbar spine control. The bar trace line is not pulled along the lines of the arms, resulting in a loss of force. During the unweighted bent over row, the left shoulder joint demonstrates an internal rotation pattern, and there is still a very obvious abduction during the extension pattern. During active shoulder elevation activity, it can be seen that there is a scapulothoracic muscle timing issue. View from the side shows that there is equal shoulder elevation. Close-up of the left scapulothoracic joint shows that the scapula moves around the chest wall a lot more than the right. There is loss of external rotation. There is also capsular tightness into internal rotation. During the single arm bent over row task, on the left side there is a similar movement pattern. As the athlete comes into extension, he wants to abduct at the shoulder joint. During the overhead press at peak elevation, there is loss of space between the left deltoid and left side of the face again. During the press-up task, which is a close chain exercise, there does not appear to be any scapulothoracic alterations in movement. Summary of findings for Athlete 4. I believe this is a capacity issue that has started to affect the skill of the movement. My reasoning for this: there is reduced range of movement at the shoulder joints, in particular lateral rotation and internal rotation, on testing. This lack of available rotation at the shoulder joints has resulted in compensatory movements at the scapulothoracic joint. Also, this lack of rotation is not allowing the athlete to extend correctly. Instead, he needs to gain abduction with the extension to get the range of movement. Corrective exercises should focus on increasing mobility whilst creating movement stability at the scapulothoracic joint. For this reason, joint and soft tissue stretching should be commenced. This athlete will now perform a rowing exercise using rope. As the pull is commenced, the rope should be pulled apart. This pulling apart of the rope will initiate the rotator cuff to be activated during the extension pattern. This will allow greater range of movement whilst the rotator cuff is activated. Another exercise that should be given to improve scapulothoracic rhythm is elevation whilst providing lateral rotation with a TheraBand. This resistance should be held into an extension pattern. This will mobilise the tissues and allow them to lengthen in the extended position, increasing the mobility at the shoulder joint whilst maintaining the scapulothoracic rhythm.